11 a.m. We're about halfway through running payroll for 25,000 of our partners.
I was actually looking out the window talking on the phone to a vendor.
I was in my office in a meeting with another person.
I was standing, speaking to a group of people.
I was in an office building on the 3rd floor.
I happened to be in the lobby of our building.
I felt the ground roll and rumble.
The first was sort of gentle rolling.
And as things started to shake, rattle, and roll.
I felt that first jolt.
I think I was lifted off the ground.
Felt like a train hit the building.
And then there was the third one, and I said, I gotta go.
The building's shaking.
The lights swinging like crazy.
Light fell down near my cubicle.
And all the walls were moving, the floor was going up and down.
Columns just jerking back and forth.
The windows imploded.
All I had to do was back up against the wall and hope nothing fell.
It's a business owner's worst nightmare. An unexpected disaster that not only threatens the lives of employees and customers, but the very future of a company. Whether it's of man-made origin, like a shocking terrorist attack, or of nature, like the 6.8 Nisqually earthquake that struck Seattle in 2001. Disasters can strike suddenly with little or no warning. How should you prepare yourself and your business for such an event?
It's important that you plan for all types of hazards and you start to say, what are we going to do if this should happen?
While an earthquake or terrorist act may be the biggest disaster you'll face, other dangers can be just as costly to your business. Even power outages can disrupt and permanently alter the viability of your company.
A power outage may not be too big in the eyes of a lot of places, but if you have no power, you have no business. When you have no business, you have no customers. When you have no customers, you have no income.
Preparing for an earthquake is a good starting point and can help you in planning for other serious events.
Preparing for an earthquake, because of the complexity of the problem, really puts us in very much better position to deal with the potential of a terrorist act or any number of other disasters that may come our way in the future.
Studies show that no matter how severe and dramatic the disaster, there are steps you and your employees can take to prepare ahead of time in order to reduce your risk. Doing so may well mean saved lives and your company's future survival. In the next few minutes, we'll show you how to help protect your human and physical resources, as well as the continuity of your business. The Nisqually earthquake that shook Seattle caused hundreds of injuries and millions of dollars in damage. But while destructive, it pales in comparison to the superquakes that will strike the region. Scientists say Cascadia, the 700-mile-long area stretching from Northern California to southern British Columbia, has the potential for some of the largest earthquakes in the world. The region faces a dangerous seismic triple threat. Deep earthquakes like Nisqually, while the most common, are the least potent. New evidence reveals dozens of shallow faults that could cause catastrophic damage to metropolitan areas. And a massive magnitude 9 subduction zone quake could wreak havoc all along the Pacific Northwest coast, creating large tsunami waves.
It'll be an enormous event. The ground is going to shake for 2 to 4 minutes along the I-5 corridor from north of Vancouver, BC, well into California. And we know that there are pieces of our infrastructure that will not do well with this long, sustained shaking.
But even a massive earthquake is survivable.
You do survive these things. There is not mass destruction. There's significant destruction. There's a lot of displacement, a lot of economic loss. But with thoughtful approaches to the problem, understanding the problem and a thoughtful approach, you can really improve your chances to both survive and prosper after an earthquake.
While the Nisqually quake was not the big one we can expect in the future, for those who experienced the severe shaking, it was big enough.
You can't believe the magnitude of the event, being inside the building and seeing things flying around and seeing lights falling, not knowing whether your peers are safe or if they're seriously injured.
Like many other businesses that day, people at Boeing and Starbucks learned some valuable lessons from the Nisqually earthquake. Lessons that can be applied to other businesses and to other hazards.
The Nisqually earthquake was a good wake-up call for a lot of people, because it caused them to want to review the plans that they have. And there was evidence to show that those that did planning were able to survive, sustain little damage, and able to continue business.
But perhaps the biggest danger to a business is after the hazard is over. Many companies will simply be unable to recover. A recent study found more than a quarter of businesses hit by some kind of disaster never open their doors for business again. Small to medium-sized businesses are particularly at risk and are less able to absorb an interruption to their business.
For small businesses particularly, because there isn't a lot of support, there isn't a lot of providers out there, you are on your own. So it's important that you take advantage of planning, analysis, and preparing for the eventual disaster that will come. It will come, but be prepared for it.
There are three main areas in which you can prepare for events that could be disastrous to your business. They include protecting your human and physical resources and your business operation. First, consider how you can protect your human resources, your employees. There's at least a 1/3 probability that a disaster will strike during business hours. Employees need to be just as prepared in their workplace as in their home. Meet with them twice a year to review emergency plans at work and discuss actions to prepare at home.
Making sure that our employees and our families are well prepared for a disaster event is really the first step, I think, in planning what a business needs to be able to respond to an earthquake when it does happen.
Conduct earthquake drills, such as drop, cover, and hold. Drop to the floor and take cover under a sturdy desk or table. Hold on until the shaking stops, which in a subduction zone quake could last more than 4 minutes. Don't stand in a doorway or go outside during an earthquake. The likelihood of something falling on you on your way out is much greater than actually being trapped in a building. Starbucks employees knew what to do and escaped serious injury by taking cover under their desks.
As a retailer, we keep a lot of merchandise up on our workstations, so all the glassware and everything was flying all over. Computer monitors were coming off the desks, and some of our lights were starting to fall from the ceilings. And fortunately, everybody dove under their workstations or under their conference tables.
After any event, determine whether you should stay where you are or evacuate your employees. Listen to a battery-operated radio for instructions. A NOAA Weather Service radio gives warnings and information on all hazards. For airborne threats, like chemical, biological, or radiation, move upwind from the impacted area or shelter in place. Go to an interior room and seal vents, doors, and windows. If you become exposed, wash thoroughly and seek medical care. For earthquakes, wait until the ground stops shaking. You will be safe inside most buildings, but if you determine your facility is not safe, then evacuate. If you're on the coast and the ground starts shaking, move inland and head for higher ground to avoid potential tsunami waves. How workers exit the building is vital to their safety. Each business should have an evacuation plan with 2 or 3 different ways to get out of the building and an area where everyone should meet.
Once we made the decision to evacuate, we quickly spread the word to our floor wardens, and here at Starbucks we've built a series of what we call floor wardens. They're individuals within each department who have the responsibility to put on an orange vest and a hard hat and just make sure everybody in their area is out of the building.
Our managers will run a safety drill with their employees by walking them out of a building. It takes about 10 minutes in one of their meetings. We also run evacuation drills for an entire building where we coordinate with our local fire departments and pull the buzzer and employees evacuate out in the building that way. But during the Nisqually quake, it was real. That was the real thing. And our employees understood because they practiced what to do in the event of a disaster.
Keep emergency kits on hand. Store some supplies outside your building in a secure area.
So we had 2,200 plus people out in the parking lot with all the supplies in the building. So one of the lessons was to store supplies outside your building where you can get them, because that's where you'll be after an earthquake.
This is one of the 3 containers that we have within our company for all of our facility, and this contains a lot of our emergency supplies for our volunteer disaster responders and our sector leaders. And
emergency services won't be able to respond right away. So your employees need to know what to do to take care of themselves and each other after a disaster.
Emergency services are going to be dispatched to other localities and other areas that are not going to be coming to your assistance. So it's very important that you prepare in your plans to be self-sufficient for at least 72 hours.
Slide this underneath. Okay.
Consider first aid, CPR, and other emergency response training to learn how to deal with fires, serious injuries, and trapped victims. Call your local emergency management office or fire department for classes.
Any kind of injury really that you could deal with, barring the need for a major splint or a backboard carrying device, is in here. Antiseptics, bandages, ACE bandages, ice packs, you name it, it's in here. And there are probably 50 of these scattered around the building.
Employees can keep individual emergency kits containing basic items like water, energy bars, a flashlight, batteries, radio, first aid kit, and other personal supplies like prescription medication.
Individuals, employees need to have what we call a grab-and-go bag. A backpack or a small handbag that is quick and easy to just grab during a disaster, to at least get them going or to at least sustain them for 72 hours.
Immediately after a disaster, phones are to be used only for life-threatening emergencies. Beyond that, maintaining communication with employees is crucial.
You realize all the communication you've counted on for the past several years is no longer available. None of the phones worked, which was a surprise to us. We always thought once we got out of the building, the cell phones would be available. We wouldn't have our landlines, of course, but we all had cell phones. We all had Nextel repeaters even with two-way function, and none of those worked because they all run through cell sites. So our learning was invest in some simple two-way walkie-talkies that just send signals to each other.
In case phones don't work and you're trying to communicate with other branches, have designated people meet at a pre-arranged location.
The fundamental concept for our emergency operations centers is initially to have no reliance on any technology. We have a set of things which rely on runners, people actually going, seeing what's going on.
Or in the event that some long-distance phone lines may work, have a contact person or company outside the state that all your offices can get in touch with. Set up an emergency out-of-state message line so you can update employees on what's happening. This can help relieve anxiety and a sense of isolation in the days and weeks following a disaster. Starbucks set up a big tent where they brought in groups of several hundred employees at a time to tell them about the damage to the building and when they would be in operation again.
And I think it really helped a lot of people get over the fact that they might be anxious about going back to the site of an event.
Protecting your assets, your physical resources, comes next. A key lesson from the Nisqually earthquake is that retrofitting your facility and securing its contents can be extremely effective.
You came after the earthquake and looked at some of these, the paint was actually blistering off these plates. And the reason it blistered is because these braces move and create friction here that heated up the plates, and it was the heat that made the paint blister. So when the structural engineers came back and looked through, they saw the blistering paint. They said, great, these things did just what they were supposed to do. They funneled all the energy right down to these plates, and the paint blistered, and that told us they worked just like they were supposed to.
This would be a hollow clay tile. This would be unreinforced masonry structure. This would be quite vulnerable to earthquake damage.
Consider having your building evaluated by a professional engineer to help identify potential hazards. Keep in mind that an ideal time to make improvements is during a major addition or renovation. Even if you don't own the building, Talk to your owner about upgrades and access to your facility following a disaster.
You may have a structure that you think is designed to meet the current building codes, but you've got to remember that the building codes just prevent the building from collapsing. If you need that building to stay in business after the earthquake, you want to talk to your engineers to how do I improve this building so it meets my performance objective in keeping the company going.
It's vital to protect your business's contents from damage. Secure file cabinets and bookcases to wall studs. Brace heavily loaded racks or shelves in both directions. Strap computers to desks or countertops. Store heavy equipment and merchandise close to the floor. A rule of thumb to remember is, if you don't bolt or secure it, it will fall over.
I wanted to show you how we protect these tall cabinets. In an earthquake, these are free to move. What I'm doing, however, is moving this cabinet. And in an earthquake, the cabinet is going to be relatively motionless, and this piece down here is going to move with the building. To secure our smaller devices, computers, PCs, we've installed this non-slip pad under the processor itself. There's one here under the monitor. And then we have these straps over here on this side that hold the monitor to keep it from falling off this way. The pads keep it from sliding frontwards and backwards. We do the same thing on these, on all of our monitors. This one is just a little bit different. There's a track to put the snap hook in, but here you see the strap. There's one on both sides and the mat down below. Back when I started this project, it was a leap of faith to go to a large group of managers and say that we need to spend $1 million or $2 million to protect our computing equipment. So we built a significant business case based on here's the value of your computing assets. And if a significant amount of those were destroyed, how long would it take for the company to resume business? And what would that cost on a daily basis? And it turns out to be millions and millions of dollars every day that the company would lose. So based on the business case, we were able to go forward, and all of the computing assets that we had secured rode through the earthquake with no problems whatsoever. In other areas of the Boeing company, computing equipment that was damaged, destroyed, all kinds of things. So we did very well. Proved the worth of what we're doing.
This will prevent the lights from swinging like pendulums as they did before. We've restrained the lights off the corners at 45 degrees in each direction, so no matter which way the waves come, the lights will be pretty stable. It also prevents one wire from breaking and the corner of the light from dropping, so it's now got 2 extra wires at each corner, keep it up in the air.
Regularly back up all of your critical data and store it off-site.
If you don't back it up and there's a disaster, you're going to lose all that information. And if you have to relocate, or if your building has been red tagged or you can't go back in, you're not going to be able to continue business as usual.
So simply strapping down things, the way we store our inventory, the way we store our information and back it up, these kinds of things are low cost but very high impact for protecting a business.
Consider alternatives for backup power should you need equipment to run continuously. Many businesses would be in serious trouble if their power went out for more than an hour or two. Have you considered what problems you might face? Planning for how you will continue your business operation after a disaster is critical. Strategic partnerships can literally save the day and your business, whether it's a power outage or something more serious.
Okay, and I will get that to your mom today.
That's what Julie Whirling found out when a devastating fire decimated her florist shop the day before Mother's Day, the busiest time of the year for her.
I was out doing deliveries, picking up the kids, and received a phone call from my sister saying that the shop was on fire. The whole block was on fire.
An accidental fire from a lit cigarette started in the basement of a building where Julie has her florist shop in Friday Harbor. The massive fire quickly engulfed a whole block of the town. Within 10 minutes, the building was gone. Julie saw her life's dream and the store's income go up in smoke.
We just kind of all stared at it and went, no way, you've got to be kidding. This is 2 days before Mother's Day, and we had 120, I think, orders sitting on the table.
Julie's plight became front-page news as crews battled the blaze. The close-knit community came to her rescue. Ace Hardware immediately became the temporary flower shop.
We went up there and they had cleaned out their Pepsi cooler, Coke cooler, and said, here's your flower cooler, and emptied off, you know, like the front half of their stores. They started taking flower orders for us, answering the phones.
Ours was just a little part. You know, we've already got the space and they needed a roof and a cooler. We happen to have it.
A wholesale florist in Tacoma loaded up a whole truck's worth of flowers for Julie and made the long trek up to the island.
When he got here, we met him at Ace Hardware, and when he opened up the truck, we just cried. I mean, we were pulling out boxes and buckets.
More than 150 orders were assembled and delivered, all in time for Mother's Day.
I felt very liked and loved on this island because everybody was helping.
Although she had never considered or planned on it prior to the fire, what Julie experienced that day was strategic partnerships that helped save her business. Develop relationships with other companies who might be able to help you should disaster strike.
Our partnerships with our computer suppliers are very important. We have very good working relationships with our suppliers. Dell, for example, they work 24 hours a day in the days following the Cascadia earthquake to rapidly replace our computing equipment that was damaged and not repairable.
Working in partnership with other businesses is very, very important, and something that businesses do not do too often. And it's too bad, because if you're not working with your neighbors and your fellow businesses, you're going to find that you're going to be standing out there all by yourself, and you're not going to survive a disaster.
Keeping your business in operation requires strategic planning before disaster strikes. Walk through the potential hazards you face in your area and ask yourself how your business could be impacted. Some key questions to ask. How would your primary suppliers be affected? Are there alternative sources for what you will need to stay in operation? How will your customers be impacted? Do they still want or need your product or service? Can they afford it? Think about other external factors. What is your plan if roads to your company are closed? Other businesses next door have major damage, or news coverage of a disaster frightens potential customers away from your area.
And there are ways of kind of walking through this rather simply and identifying what the key components of operating our business are and things that we can do to improve their reliability in the event of a disaster.
Keep up to date on your insurance. Make sure you have the right coverage for your needs, and be sure to add any new purchases or improvements you've made. For Julie, this was a costly mistake.
The day of the fire, we had just finished a remodel, and we had just purchased 2 brand new coolers, and we neglected to put that onto our insurance. So our coolers, we just kind of lost. We just had to eat them.
Looking at an insurance policy during a disaster or after the disaster is actually a day late. You need to take a look at that ahead of time to make sure that your policy is up to date and cover the new acquisitions that you have just purchased within the last couple of years.
Following the disaster, determine the options open to you. Research suggests that unless business owners make good decisions about recovery, the largest losses come not from the direct damage of the disaster itself, but in the years following the disaster.
Decisions that are made prior to a disaster and during a disaster has long-term effects. And so the choice that you make is going to determine whether or not your business is going to actually survive and whether or not you will be able to start up from where the disaster left you.
Keep in mind that following any large-scale disaster in a community, things never get back to normal. The community almost always changes permanently, creating a new business environment. Companies that adapt to those new circumstances and take the right steps can not only survive a major disaster, but potentially can achieve real success in the years following the event.
I would never think that a disaster was going to happen to me. And the people next door in the same block never thought it would happen to them. So it always happens to someone else, but someday you might be that someone else. And so having a plan, you know, you have to have some kind of plan.
As we developed the business case to convince our directors and upper management that this was the right thing to do, we began to realize this is the right thing for everybody. It's good for Boeing, and if you have a small business, you should think about doing this as well.
When the bricks are falling off the parapet, the roads are closed, and you realize you don't have a plan. And so it's very important that you realize that at any given day or hour here, geologic risk could affect the way you operate, and you need to take that into account in terms of your business plan.
Part of the front of the building just fell down, crushing some cars. The good news is that we have no reports of anybody being seriously hurt here, but look at all the damage there.
It was having those plans in place that really helped us survive, helped us get back in business. I know when we walked out into the parking lot and our CEO turned to me and said, "Rick, now what do we do? What are the next steps?" I could actually look at him and say, "Orrin, I've got a plan. I know what we're going to do next. We need to meet at 8 o'clock at our emergency facility. I've got the teams. I've already called our structural engineer. I've got all the phone numbers right here. I can be in touch with them, and I'll have a plan for you tomorrow on how we get back into business." That was critical.
Preparedness. Preparedness is the key to the whole thing. You really need to be prepared.
Being prepared truly does pay off.